Hi, everyone. I'm John Doring, and this is the X, NMRAX. It's the place where model railroaders, railroad modelers, and all folks crazy about trains from all around the world come together to share ideas and insights and inspirations. This is the X. Our next presenter works in multiple scales and genres, covering planes and trains and automobiles. He's the owner and CEO of Weathering a Touch of Yesterday. Please help me to welcome the Mudfather himself, the one and only Ralph Renzetti.
Thank you, John. Thank
You
you.
betcha.
Thank you. So, as mentioned, weathering with AK watercolor pencils. Um, I was a bit leery of these things in the beginning, but I've since had a chance to play with them. This is the full set. There's 37 colors in the full set, and they come also in sets of 5. And there was an article done in was it Railroad Craftsman by George Dutka on using the pencils. And I found in going through some of the videos that are online, um, they're not as described, let's put it that way. Um, a lot of people say that you can put them on just by taking actually, let me put my camera down for you. There we go. So a lot of people say you can just mark your pencils down on the side of a car or whatever, and it goes on. Well, the dark colors work well, but when you start getting into the lighter colors, like here's one here, um, I wanted to, on the other side, I did it, put some white down to streak the logo that's on here. Well, it doesn't look the same way as they show it in some of the videos, but I'll show you here. I've already done some. If I do this dry, now that I've got some other colors on there, and I start off basically with a dull coat of some sort, whether it's Tester's dull coat, Tamiya dull coat, or flat, or whatever you want. You can also use Artist Dull matte finishes. It works better on the matte finishes for sure, absolutely for sure. But when you put it on the dulled surface, it tends to go on a little bit. Now I'm not pushing hard, so if I pushed hard, you would get clumps of it. It works better, and I have just a little thing of water here. It works better if you do it wet. You can do it with the water on the pencil, or you can use a brush and touch the pencil. You let that dry, come back and manipulate it with a brush. I can do some more over here to show you. I'm having a ball with these things right now. And I've done some items that I've done a 124 scale oil drum. I've done some rail cars and so on with, and I'll show you the pictures later, done with the pencils, and I use in combination with other things. Like here, I have my gouaches and my sponge. Just let me dampen the sponge a little bit. And what ends up happening Once, like I say, once you get something on the surface, these pencils work better. You get more color down on the surface. So just by adding some of the gouache, and I'm only doing it, come on, just lightly. Once it dries, I can come back with a colored pencil. Now these pencils, they're the full set, just to give you an idea, the full set's about $45. Each individual pencil runs from about $1.25 to $2, depending on where you shop. And I have the 37 pencil set, and it's great for doing on your wooden kits and so on for siding, scenery, structures. I was not going to use them on the plastic, but then I started playing around and I've sort of got to like them. They come in sets of 5. So you have your rusting and streaking effects, and it's about $6 a set. So it comes with light rust, medium rust, dark rust, strong ochre, and vivid orange. And then you have dirt marks, and that comes with 5. It's dust and rain marks, concrete marks, earth brown, streaking dirt, and buff. And then there's chipping and aging. And this is all stuff, these things were originally designed for the military guys. And I've been a supporter of the AK and MIG ammo products because I worked in a hobby shop that was frequented by the military guys. And that's how I got introduced to this stuff. But the railroad guys don't seem to uh, not understand. They just don't want to cross lines. They walk into a store and they won't go over to the military side to see what's going on over there or what they can use for the railroad unless somebody else points it out to them. So I've sort of made it a mission to try and promote this stuff as much as I can. It really works well. So this is the light rust, and all I'm doing is the side of the pencil, and that way you hit the high points of the roof here. And I keep turning the pencil so I don't get a flat spot. And if you get any shavings, I guess, that fall down into the cracks, all you have to do is blow them off or have a dry brush. So that's one color. Now I can go back and add. So here's the darker one now. Here, this one is medium rust. So I'm not going to go as far down the side because I started off, the gouache that I used was raw sienna. So now I'm working into the darker colors up near the top. And this process is what I've done over here on this side. And then I sealed it with dull coat. And there are times when the pencil, there's a hard spot. Sometimes in the lead, it ends up scratching the surface and then nothing holds because it's too smooth or shiny. But you just go back and correct it. Let's try a darker one now. This one is dark rust. Now on the top here, I did not use any water on this. This is all done dry. And you can take it down the sides if you want to continue on a little bit more. And by using 3 or 4 different colors, you get a lot of variation in the color, as well as blending of colors. Whereas if I was to do that with gouaches, I would have to do one color, seal it, then do the next color and seal it, because the gouaches, they're reactivated, just like these are. If you do it wet, it's reactivated as soon as you add water. So this process can work to your advantage by doing it dry. But you have to have a rough surface to work on. And I found by putting the gouache on first, after I do a dull coat of some sort, that you end up with a nice rough surface to accept the pencils. Now let's go one darker again. This is called streaking dirt. Most of the colors that they've chosen were sort of named after the colors that they have in their mineral-based products. Which are like AK. Their main one that I use, which is my go-to color, is 1203. It's called Streaking Grime. So at this point, I can either stop or add more, but I feel that that's about all I want to do to this roof. So we'll go back here now and I'll wet my brush and I'll show you how that works. And then I'll put some dark rust or rust on the side as well and work that. So you can either start with a really damp brush, and if it's really damp, you're gonna take most of it off. The nice part of this is that if you haven't sealed it, you can activate this at any given time with a paintbrush and dampen water or dampen with water. The idea is to get it to streak down. And if you have a lot like down here, because this is what ends up happening when water dries, when you had a big drop of water, it leaves what they call tide marks. And the idea of going back with the brush is to get rid of the tide marks and blend it into the side of the car. It may take going back and forth a couple of times to do it, to get it to work the way you want it. But that's the beauty of it. I can go back to an area that I've already done and I can reactivate it. But then, what's a good color? Well, let's go with that one. So what ends up happening on the top of the door, there's what they call a rain gutter, and it goes to a certain point. So between the two ends of the rain gutter, you're going to have a little bit less dirt and grime below that gutter than you do at the ends here. So over here, I can add some color. And by doing this, you're going to have to end up and go back and do your white over again. If you do your white last, you'll see in one of the photographs I show you later, it actually stands out better when you do the white on top of your streaks. So sometimes you don't want to have a whole lot of water on it. So once you dip it in, all I have right in the corner here is a little tub of water. And then I sort of take the bead of water off the tip before I come onto the car. Or you can do it with the full blob of water there. So now I use a wider brush instead of the fine brush that I used on the white. This one here is specifically made by AK. I don't know what it's called, but you can see the bristles are like a comb sort of effect. That's the way it's cut. It helps when doing the streaking. So, and if you're anything like me, I have to end up turning things so that I can get a better angle. I can't do it when it's like so and bring it down. My hand tends to want to curve. So by doing it this way, I get a better action out of it. So I dampen it to reactivate it. And by adding the water to, now there's the two colors there, they're blending into each other. And I'm just thinking about this now. I should have mentioned also, this car was a nice bright blue, and I dull it down with a bit of a white wash to wash out the colors. And you can go back, as long as you haven't sealed it, you can go back at any time and reactivate. So I've got the white done over on this other side. I can reactivate it. Blend it right out if I want. Like I say, I don't want to put water on this because I don't want it to bleed down in between the ribs, because usually where you get your rust is on the tops of it first. And by using the sponge, you can see down in between the ribs, there's a little bit of color there. That's from using the sponge. And that's just about right as far as I've seen on prototype photographs. And usually I always work from a prototype photograph. That's one thing I always try to do, is use a prototype photograph. Now, I have some other things here that I want to try and show you. If you guys watched me on the last NMRX, not on the sign one, but on the salt and salt weathering, you can use these pencils to do this as well. So and depending on what colors you actually want, like I usually on anything other than white or black, I usually use the darker earth tones. I usually stay away from the raw sienna. I'll use burnt sienna a little bit. Come on. They dry out very quickly. It's the pencil tip absorbs a lot of the water. Okay. Here's an earth brown. Hmm. I find with some of the pencils, I don't know what it is, but the consistency is not quite the same from pencil to pencil. It's like the pencil is harder, some of them, than others. I mean, when I dip it in the water, I can see color going into the water, but when I come back with a wet tip, it's not leaving anything. And this is one of the issues that I found with these pencils to start with. So I'll try and do this one dry. So, okay, so dry, it's doing okay. It's leaving streaks. Bright orange, strong ochre. Put this one over here. Gonna blend that with a different color. Medium rust. Okay, come on, water, dry up. I have myself my little trusty fan to help the water dry up. Got this at the dollar store. Takes 2 batteries. I use this a lot of times instead of a hair dryer. Number one, if I'm doing something on a video, I'll use this instead of a hair dryer because the hair dryer is too noisy. This one's easier to control. Doesn't blow everything all over the place. Okay. Now, there's different ways of doing it. Let me put this back down again. So I have a little bit of water on the brush. And if you come down the sides of your mark, you can drag it down and then down through the middle. Like this really works really well with rust pits on the side of rail cars. Anything that's metal. I mean, you can put these things down the rivets of the car. Now that shell that I had there didn't have, well, it does have rivets, I guess. No, it doesn't. It's a welded seam car. But if you ran the pencil crayons down across the rivets and then come back with a fine brush, you can get the pencils to tuck in nice into the rivet detail. So there's a big mark there. So I go down the sides on either side of it first, and then down through the middle. And if I really want to, I can take a wet brush and wash this all off and start over. It will leave a little bit of residue, but just like the gouaches, if you're not happy with the way they turn out, wet your sponge, rinse it off. You could wet the sponge and wash this off. And what you end up doing is, especially on a car that has rivet details and welded seams, what it does is it drives the paint into the crevices so that you get that detail of rust right up against the edges, which is kind of hard to do unless you have a really fine brush to get in there. So there's some of the streaks that it creates. Now, over in this area, you could do the same thing, although I think you've seen it work there. Now, this is something that a lot of the guys in the military like to play around with, and I sort of got into the habit as well. I love doing oil drums. Let me take this off. So the idea is get a bunch of it up near the top. Almost tempted to go to a darker pencil. Streaking dirt. Yep, that's the one. It takes a little bit of practice to get the streaks the way you want it. And if you don't get it right the first time, like I say, it's just damp sponge or a Kleenex or whatever, and you can wash it right off and start all over again, which is the beauty of this. The more you work on this stuff, the better you'll get. The better you get, the more confidence you have. Put some dry stuff down here. A lot of water there. Right. You could do a bit on the top. Oh, there's one here called chipping effect. Sepia chipping color. And with the pencil, it's not always easy to get right into the crevices and so on, but if you wet it, like that's the top of the drum, the release cap. Of course, the pencil doesn't want to go all the way and tuck right in, but once you wet it, the water takes it right in there. No problem. So now use the wide brush to get some of it to come down. You can use it flat, you can use it sideways. Once you get the rust going, then you can come back and darken up spots if you want, because obviously that green and white they're too bright. So you want to dirty them up. So that's the two colors mixed together. And like I said, if you want, you can come in, you can wash it right off if you want. And all it takes is a sponge. Clean it up. Go back and add some more color. See, now if you wet your surface as well and then come back with your pencil, you get more color on as well. So there's so many different things that you can do with these things. Like on the top there, that would have been just chipped paint. And you can blend it with, where's the rust? Bright rust, light rust. There's so many different things, and it's just a matter of experimenting, getting used to something new. Think outside the box sort of thing. Let me see here. Oh, I have a couple of photographs I would like to show you, and then we can, come on, open up. Oh, sure. It opens on the other screen. Hang on. All right, share screen. So, and it's gone to the other side as well. So this locomotive, can you see that? Okay. So this locomotive is done with a wash of acrylic, white, and then with the weathering pencils. So let's see if I can make it a little bit bigger so you can see it. Now the trucks are done my usual way. It's Rust-Oleum first. Like I take them apart take the
Well, can
side
you
frames off.
maximize the picture?
Yes. How's that?
Thank you.
Okay, so the trucks I usually use are Rust-Oleum. It's a spray paint. I take them apart, take the side frames off, and I mount them on a stick so that I can paint them. And then I use gouaches to finish off the truck on top of that. And then a little bit of an oil-based paint to do the oil and grease in the axle bearings. Now, this locomotive came to me from a fellow in New York, and the way it was packaged, the railings got damaged. So the new railings I just received yesterday, so that'll be finishing this off. So how come it doesn't want to change? Let me do this. So that's the same locomotive. I use a liquid mask if I can't get the windows out, but all of the weathering on this was done with the weathering pencils. And I even, I don't do graffiti, but he asked me to sign it, so I did it like graffiti as well. That there is done with the weathering pencils. All that is a clear piece of acetate that I cut the teeth into. This is for my next project. Trains, planes, and automobiles. This is for my barn find that I'm working on. And then that's a 1/24 scale oil drum, and it's done with the weathering pencils. The dark here, because I needed it to be shiny, is an enamel type paint, an oil-based paint. But the rest of it, all the weathering is done with the pencils. And that's, if you work at it hard enough and get enough practice, you too can do this kind of stuff. Now, I couldn't find an oil drum in 1/24 scale, so I built this one from scratch. Oh yes, and the best one. This is also 1/24 scale. So I did the wood grain with the pencils. The bottles are 3D printed with decals on them, as we say in Canada, decals. But the cases are, the wood grain is done with the pencils. So this is what I have fun doing. I do this, I just love doing it. So we're back to here. Okay. So you can see there the drum has oh, let's see there. Why doesn't it want to focus? First it focuses, then it doesn't. There we go. Anyway, the idea behind it is to practice until you can get it right. It doesn't always work the first time you do it. So you go back and you do it again. Start over again. This was just done with a little bit of color from the pencils, and I just washed it off. I just left it like that. But I'll do some more here. Where's the right color? There we go. Medium rust. These pencils are even great. If you're using other products to do your weathering, you can come back with these afterwards and add to it. So this was done by putting the color on, the dark color on first, the rust, and then painting on the different colors. Simple. So if you've done it already on your car, that you have your rust and you have some streaks and grime and so on, come back with the pencils, add your pit marks, just leave a dot. Come on, there we go. Use the fine brush again. Now there's still quite a bit of water in those droplets, but that's okay. Normally when I'm doing working on stuff like this, it's not out in front of me like I have it right now. I usually have it tucked into my chest so I can keep my arms from flailing in the air and have more control over them. So, and if you goof it up a bit, you come back with some water. So there you go. That's my take on these pencils. I'm really liking them. And if you don't have to buy the whole set, I suggest you go out if you're going to use it for rust streaks and so on. You go out and buy yourself the 5 pencil sets. You may also want to pick up a black. Now this one here is called dirty white, so it's not a bright white. Although I do have in the box there is a bright white, proper white pencil, and a proper black pencil. There's also metallic colors. There is, where are they? There's aluminum, gold, dark aluminum, brass, and copper. And of all of the pencils, the metallic ones do not react with the water. When I originally did my test on these things, where'd my test one go? Oh, sure. Now I can't find it. Anyway, I did the test and I added the water to it, and I could not get the metallics to wash down. They stayed solid colors. So if that's what you want, in some cases, it's a good idea. But if you want the metallic ones to blend, it's not going to happen. Yeah. So if anybody has any questions, fire away. And I
You
will see if I can answer the questions and maybe even an example at the same time.
you bet, Ralph. We've got a lot of questions. You ready?
I'm ready. Go for it.
Okay, let's see. So where do you get these? Is there a specific place that you would buy these?
A lot of hobby shops are starting to bring it in, especially the ones that have the military models. Because, like
Okay.
I mentioned, these were originally designed for the military guys. And you'll see on the back of the box, it's all military examples they're using, except for this wooden cable reel. But all of the rest of it is all like there's a tank, turret,
Right. Right.
uh, a spaceship, all kinds of different things. But invention is, or a necessity is the mother of invention, as they say. So,
Right.
uh,
Right. Well, in the chat, several people have posted links through your presentation about finding them on Amazon and such.
mhm.
There's some information that people can kind of check there. So, do you think is this a good sort of methodology and system for somebody who's new, kind of a newbie to weathering, or is there a different kind of method that you might suggest starting with?
That's a good question. I wouldn't. Well, you can't really say that I wouldn't recommend it to newbies if they've never tried anything else. There's no reason why they can't get used to these
Yeah.
and try it. Uh, don't be afraid to try. Think outside the box.
Right.
Pardon me, outside your comfort zone. Everybody has their own comfort zone. A lot of people don't like weathering because they're afraid to make something dirty and make a mistake.
Right.
These are forgiving. Um, when I use the gouaches, it's also forgiving. So I use all kinds of products. I use from water-based to oil-based to lacquer products in all of my weathering, and I mix them up. I
Even on
don't
the
just.
even on the same model, you would use more than one technique.
Yep, yep, I do. I
Okay.
do.
Are these pencils? I mean, you mentioned that all except for some of the metallic ones kind of react with water, so they're kind of like less like lead and more like watercolors.
Yes. Now, up until these things came out, I was using a product by I think it's DWERT, DeWert, um, watercolor pencils, and they were literally the watercolor paint that you used to get in those trays with the little squares.
Mm-hmm.
They were made into pencil leads and then coated with whatever the wood shell, and they were watercolor pencils. These ones here have a slight waxy sort of characteristic to them, so that they go on better. And I don't, to me, wax and water don't mix, but these seem to work. So
Somehow they do.
I'm not going to knock them.
Do you need a special kind of pencil sharpener for these, or just a normal?
What I use, I went out to the art store and I bought one of these things. It's just a regular for wooden pencils.
Yeah.
So I sharpen all my pencils with this, the wooden ones and these watercolor pencils.
Okay.
And the trick to these pencils is not to take them to an extreme point, because they're soft enough that that point will break as soon as you put it down on your model. So
Okay. Yeah.
just slightly short of really pointed.
Gotcha.
Like
Gotcha.
that's about the best I would do on this. I wouldn't go any further.
Oh yeah. Well, that's pretty sharp, right? A number of people posted in the chat that they always experiment first with their cheaper cars before they try something on their good stuff. I suppose you probably would
Absolutely. One of the
agree with
things I recommend with all my clinics is if you can and you want to try this, next time there's a local train show or a flea market or whatever, or you have a whole bunch of old blue box cars, that maybe even the hobby shop has a bunch of cars that they're selling off for $3 to $5 a piece, scoop them up.
that. Mhm.
Even if it's just the shell, you don't need the wheels. I mean, if you want to convert it into a regular car on your layout, that's fine, but all you need is the shell to practice on. and if you screw it up, it doesn't matter.
Right, right. Do these AK weathering pencils have a shelf life that you're aware of? Will they last for a while, or do they degrade in any way?
I really don't know. That's a question that only time will tell, because
Hmm.
these things, they're only out now for probably a year. I got my pencils May or March of last year,
Okay.
and I've been playing with them ever since. And I've hardly sharpened them down because I use the side of the point rather than the point itself. And as you do it on the side, like I say, you just keep turning it. It keeps it sharp
It
just
kind
by
of
turning it with the water, right?
self sharpens, huh? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's cool. Um, you mentioned these military modelers. I've heard that in other clinics. Are there, and also you mentioned kind of the editorial about how model railroaders seem kind of unwilling or
Well,
skeptical of kind of broadening out to learn from
I'll give
other
you a little
hobbies.
example. A little
Yeah.
example. When I worked in the hobby store, my first experience, the boss said to me with the first customers coming in, he said, "Okay, you watch. They're going to come in the front door, and just in the first few steps, I'm going to tell you whether they're military or railroad." And damn it, wasn't he right? The military guys went off to the left, the railroad guys went off to the right. But the military guys, they went all over the store. They started off in their section and came over into the railroad because they used the scenery materials. But the railroad guys refused to go over there because that's taboo, right? And you could see it every time.
That's interesting. Are there other groups like that? Like the military modelers that we should be paying attention to? Have you run into any other
War
tribes that
game
you've learned from?
war war gamers are good for doing weathering as well,
Yeah.
and they like to use their they have special paints. I I tend to I'll use watercolors, gouaches, acrylics, and there's now when you say acrylic, there's probably about 3 or 4 different types of acrylic. So when I use acrylic paints, I'll use Tamiya paints, and these things I can mix these with alcohol. I won't mix them with water. I don't use water for any of them. Uh, the first thing to remember is use the thinner that comes with the model with the paint. That's the first thing to remember. And then you can branch out from there. If you want to try using alcohol with it, experiment
Uh,
off the model. My horror story was that I used um, oh, what the hell was it? I forget the name of the paint. It was an acrylic, and I'm used to mixing alcohol with my paints. And that particular color was only brand I could get that color in.
yeah.
So I mixed it right in my airbrush, in the cup of my airbrush. And I mixed it inside with the little brush and so on, got it all mixed up nice, went to spray it, nothing came out. And when I looked inside, I turned the cup like this a little bit. Well, the level moved sideways as well. And I'm going, oh crap.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
it had turned to like a jello.
So
It
start
took
at least with matching the right stuff altogether in the beginning.
try
Yeah.
mixing it in something like this
Okay.
just to see if it mixes. If you mix water with Tamiya paint, you'll watch the paint come out of suspension.
Super, super.
Each one has their own little characteristics. Like Vallejo paints they're acrylic vinyl paints,
Okay.
whereas these Tamiya paints were originally designed to be lacquers. But the pencils are watercolor pencils, and the whatever this waxy material is in it, I have no idea, but it works,
Awesome.
and
Ralph, we
I'm
certainly
happy with them.
appreciate it. I'm getting the time warning here. I have a bunch of other questions I could ask you, so we absolutely are gonna have to have you back. And you truly are the mud father. We appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Talk soon.
Take care.